Hi, and welcome to Basic Folk, honest conversations with folk musicians. It's Cindy. I'm your host. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking to Bridget Kearney, bassist for the band Lake Street Dive. So pumped to have Bridget on the pod today. Before we get into what we talk about, let's thank our sponsors for Basic Folk. Basic Folk is supported by Tina and Her Pony. If you like fresh takes on traditional music, you might like Tina and Her Pony. Follow them on Spotify or at Tina and Her Pony. Bridget Kearney, like I said, the bassist for Lake Street Dive. She has been deeply immersed in studying music since she was a kid. From the super nerds that she met at jazz camp to the nights in her parents' basement transposing songs to the New England Conservatory of Music, Bridget's dedicated herself to the betterment of her craft for decades. Originally from Iowa, Kearney joined up with Lake Street Dive in Boston when she was at the conservatory as their upright bassist, one of the main songwriters and harmony vocalist. In our conversation, we talk about how her experience in playing in orchestras when she was younger prepared her for collaborative life in a band like Lake Street Dive. And from talking to Bridget and reading about Lake Street Dive, it seems like a very functional operation, and the way she breaks down how they communicate, while it's not perfect, it's very impressive. Bridget also talks about her own solo career and how she's beginning to explore the full potential of her voice. So, for instance, she talks about writing a song for Rachel Price, who's the lead singer of Lake Street Dive, who has this incredibly powerful voice. So she goes for that more kind of powerful sound versus when she's writing a song for herself, her own voice has this certain fragility that she can use to a song's advantage. It's pretty cool. She also talks about what it's like to be a utility player, something that I can relate to in my own career, meaning that she's good wherever you want her when it comes to playing bass and singing. It's a role that she's taken on for most of her musical career, and to hear her explain how it is to be like a utility person is really insightful and interesting. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Bridget Kearney. We're going to hear the song Love Doctor, which appears on her 2017 solo album, Won't Let You Down. There's also a video posted on my website of her performing this song live in London, and it is wild. You can check that out at cindyhouse.net. In the meantime, here's a clip of Love Doctor, and then we'll get to our conversation with Bridget Kearney on Basic Folk.
Don't pull your love doctor routine on me like you're some kind of authority. It's happened to you and it's happened to me. So don't act like there's something that you see that I can't see. Don't pull your love doctor routine on me.
All right, Bridget Kearney, this is so awesome to be talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You grew up in Iowa City, which is a place I have never been to, and I'm wondering if you could talk about how you liked that town when you were a little kid, like what it was like for you.
Yeah, well, I was just there a few days ago, so my memory is fresh. It's a wonderful place to grow up. It's very idyllic. You go to the pool in the summertime, and it's super safe. Everyone's extremely nice. It's also it's a college town, so there's people in town that do all sorts of things. Every department of the university, represents different interests and talents. And so, yeah, there's people from all over the world there that are very good at different things. And there's always kind of events going on, arts festival, jazz festival. Yeah, it's a wonderful place.
And what did your parents do?
My parents both worked at the university. So my dad was in the computer science department, and my mom worked in the College of Education.
Cool. And do you have siblings?
Yep, 3 siblings. My older brother, he lives in Washington, D.C. now. He's an economist. And my older sister is in Spokane. She's a math professor. And my little sister lives in Chicago. She's a visual artist.
So you were kind of middle end.
Yeah, I'm 3rd out of 4, although there was 5.5 years where I was the youngest. So I think, I probably hold on to some youngest child personality traits.
So as far as music in your early life, you did church choir when you were 5. Can you talk about that experience, like in the choir, and then also what role did church play in your life in general? Because it seems like you still stay connected to people from your church.
Yeah, it's a community thing. It's like people that I knew since I was born. And then the choir was probably my favorite part of church, was going. And at that church, Zion Lutheran Church, there were 4 choirs. There's like the senior choir, which is the adults. And then there's the high school choir, junior choir, and baby choir, essentially. And like for big holidays, they would put on these like extravaganzas where everyone was involved and everybody's wearing different colored robes, and there's huge organ, and they'd get like a horn section and string section. And so yeah, that was, I guess, some of my first experiences being part of an ensemble, a musical ensemble, and I really enjoyed it. I still love that music too. I think like that style of choral writing is just so beautiful. The harmonies in it. Definitely like still, just the other day we were playing in Iowa City and there were some people there from my church. So yeah, it's like a really nice community that I think like outside of schools and jobs, it is nice to have a community that's all ages, because there was like people that I knew that were much older than me. And then now there's like people that I know that are much younger than me. And there's not that many outlets that create communities like that.
Yeah, that's so true. You did piano lessons at first, but then you found the upright bass when you were 9 years old, which is pretty incredible. What originally drew you to the upright bass?
So the school orchestra starts 1 year before the school band in the public schools in Iowa, and I was really anxious to start playing an instrument. My siblings were playing, and I was just excited about music. And so I wanted to start as soon as possible. And so I had to select from one of the orchestra instruments and picked the bass because it seemed kind of the fanciest, most ostentatious of those possibilities. And always kind of imagined that I might switch the next year to something cooler. But then I just connected with it and stuck with it.
Yeah, what can you talk a little bit more about that connection you felt with the upright bass?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I had really good teachers too. So it was kind of I think that's so important to connecting with something, is just like having someone giving you good instruction so that you make quick improvements and, notice that and are able to create a sound that's doesn't sound terrible. So I think like violin is the classic instrument where like kids starting to play violin just make a terrible sound. And so that's frustrating. Like, that you're making that sound. And so if you can find a teacher that can help you like just get a basic level of musicality quickly, I think that'll make a big difference.
It's like you kind of identified that like, oh, hey, I'm doing some hard work here and it feels good.
Yeah. And then shortly after, like when I got to junior high school, that's when the jazz band started. And so you realize that the bass is really versatile. And you need a bass in pretty much every style of music, which leaves you a lot of options as you grow up and, get into different styles, you're not limited to only playing in an orchestra or, not that any instrument is, but certainly bass is like represented in tons and tons of styles.
Right. It's like playing the upright bass fit into your life path.
Yeah.
A lot easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Your dad played guitar when you were growing up. How did his playing affect you, or how did he encourage your music?
Well, both of my parents played music. My dad played in some like folk bands when he was in his 20s, and occasionally would play the guitar around the house. And my mom is a great piano player, and so was my grandmother. She was always like playing the piano. And yeah, just having that be an activity that happens normalizes you doing it yourself.
Yeah.
So when you see other people delighting in playing instruments, then it makes it seem delightful.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you started with classical music and then you moved on to studying jazz. And it sounds like when you started taking the bass seriously, maybe around high school, that you were staying up late, practicing and transcribing music, which is like, I'm trying to think in my experience, like the thing that I did in high school was like log onto the internet and try to type HTML. And that experience definitely like shaped me in that way. So I'm wondering, you staying up late, practicing transcribing, how that shaped you as a musician.
Yeah, I think high school may have been like the most intense period of practicing bass for me. Got kind of obsessed with it, and again, had really great teachers, a great classical teacher and a great jazz teacher. And so that was when I learned to get into a mode where you can spend, 6 hours working on something. And that itself is like such a great skill that you can apply to like any other skill that you want to pick up. Mm-hmm. So now, like, I'm not practicing bass as much these days, but I still work that muscle in terms of the time that I spend writing songs, the time that I spend learning music, and like getting comfortable on other instruments, practicing for like solo sets. It's still really kind of going to the same place that I like figured out how to get to when I was practicing bass in high school.
Can you talk about your experience at the Birch Creek Music Academy?
Yeah, that was a summer camp that I went to, I think 4 times growing up. It was in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin. And there was a lot of kids who were into music at my high school and in Iowa City, but I think like this specialized 2-week jazz camp was like where you met the super nerds that were like so into music and so into jazz. And they were also like really fun people to hang out with. And so it was kind of like this perfect little fantasy world where you could be as nerdy as you want to be and, practice as much as you want. And everybody was the same way. So you kind of like found your people there. And there's folks from that camp that I like still am friends with now and see out on the road.
So what made you choose to attend the New England Conservatory of Music?
Originally, like what attracted me to it, I was looking for schools that had like double degree programs, either universities or collaborative paired conservatories and universities. And so that was like a major pro for me, was that NEC had this double degree program with Tufts. And so you could go to both schools, do 1 extra year and walk away with 2 degrees, 1 music degree and 1, whatever else you want to study.
Was the price the same?
Well, it's one extra year, but actually I ended up getting it in 4.5.
Oh,
so.
Wow. And was that your thinking, or is that someone else's thinking to do that?
I guess like because there aren't any other professional musicians in my family. I think like me and my parents both probably had some anxiety about like only having a music degree. Although I haven't used that other degree really. But it felt like coming out of high school, it was a good idea to do that. And in the end, I'm really glad that I did, not necessarily because of the degree, but because of the experience. It was really nice to be able to, like, I lived at Tufts for 2 years and was part of that scene. And then also I got to do a semester abroad in college, which like NEC didn't offer that program. So yeah, it was really worthwhile. But that was kind of like what led me to NEC. And as it turns out, I think like musically it was a really good fit too, because I was in the jazz department, but their like definition of jazz is very open-minded. I think there are some other schools that are much more rigid in the sort of styles that they're teaching. And NEC is really just about like improvising and being creative and kind of the fundamental building blocks of music. And then they're very encouraging of everybody to like invent their own style. In fact, there's a class titled Development of Personal Style. So I like the students that were there and the way that they taught, I think fit in really well with like the kind of music that I wanted to make.
And can we talk about the upright bass versus the electric bass? I heard that you don't own an electric bass. Is that still true?
Technically, I own one, but it's this like kind of toy electric bass that has like a drum machine and an amp built into it.
Oh God.
It's not a functional, it's not a recording bass for sure. But yeah, I've just kind of found myself in this niche with upright and like fitting the upright into whatever setting I'm in. And yeah, have not made my way into my electric period yet, but I feel like it might happen someday.
You should do it at Newport. Kearney goes electric.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
A free idea for you.
Well, I've been seeing some really awesome electric bass players recently. Chris Wood, we've been on tour with the Wood Brothers, and Chris Wood, he plays upright and electric, but he's just doing such cool things with the electric. And then last year I was on tour with Joe Dart, who's an incredible electric player. So it's both like inspiring and kind of intimidating because, you know, I would be starting not at zero, but at, you know, knowing where all the notes are, but not really how to play the instrument.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about, because I've heard you talk about how you play electric parts on your upright bass. Like if you could put it in like layman's terms of like what that might mean and why that is like kind of interesting and incredible.
Sure. Well, I think with any instrument, there's things that the instrument encourages you to do and discourages you to do. I was just toying the other day with like playing with a slide, like a guitar slide. And that's a good example of like when you have a slide which like covers strings across the neck, it inspires you to like speak a certain language that uses notes that are directly across the neck from one another, which like probably if you didn't have a slide, you wouldn't think to do, or you wouldn't necessarily go to that. And then also it encourages you to like use bendy, slidey notes. And so that had kind of got me thinking about like just the differences between instruments in general. And electric bass, it's like the strings are shorter and usually have lower action. So there are things that you would be inclined to play on electric bass that like wouldn't be your first idea on upright, usually because they're hard to execute on the upright.
Wait, when you say shorter accents, do you just mean there's like less notes to pick from?
Same amount of notes, I think, but like the strings are closer to the strings are lower.
Oh, like your lower finger actions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of these kind of virtuosic electric things are not really in the history of upright bass. They were more like when people started playing electric, they were like, whoa, we can do this now, you know?
Right. So it's kind of like thinking about it as like if you look at like your typing keyboard, if you just like spread the notes, not the like the keys out more, and then an electric bass
totally.
as you squish the keys in.
Yep, that's a good metaphor. And then so you have to imagine like trying to type as fast as somebody who's on a normal keyboard and, you know, flailing your arms around. And it's totally possible. It's just maybe takes a little more practice. And I guess like in the last probably 5 years, I've mostly been listening to electric bass players, at least when I'm like working on stuff for Lake Street Dive or so I think I'm like picking up this language that is primarily associated with electric basses.
That's cool.
Yeah, and conversely, like upright has a whole language of its own, mostly from jazz, but you know, there are like hammer-ons and pull-offs and slides and things that the instrument does well, and those things sometimes I do without thinking about it, like on accident. Just the way I'll phrase something will be sort of within the language of upright bass, and then occasionally I'll say like, no, don't do it that way, like, because that makes it sound of this world, and I want it to sound more like it's from this other world, even though it's not.
You were in the bluegrass band Joy Kills Sorrow, which you decided to leave to focus on Lake Street Dive. Can you talk about the decision to leave that band?
Yeah, and it was sad. It was very sad because I loved playing with those guys and playing that music, and we'd done some really cool stuff together. It just kind of came down to a matter of not enough days in the year. It was like both bands were growing, which was great, but meant that if they were kind of like limiting one another, limiting one another's growth, because you know, there were only so many dates in the year. So
right.
So yeah, it was kind of a leap of faith. Definitely at the time, Joy Kills Sorrow was playing more, was bigger than Lake Street Dive was. But I had been with Lake Street Dive first, and I don't know. It was just it had to be done. So yeah, it was really sad, and then in the end, I think it was the right choice because it did allow Lake Street Dive to grow and become what it was capable of, reach its potential. Mm-hmm. So
one thing that I find so impressive about Lake Street Dive is that it's a truly collaborative band. I found this quote where you put it like so nicely. You say, "We all believe in each other and are fans of one another's musicianship." I was wondering if you could expand on how, to you, like that's sort of like the key to making all of this work.
There are so many decisions to be made in a band. Musical decisions, you know, what's the song we're going to write? What's the album we're going to make? What songs are we putting on the set? And then also just like life decisions, you know, how many dates a year are we going to tour? What restaurant are we going to eat at tonight? Like you're constantly trying to agree upon things. And so like having us as starting point, just like a genuine admiration for each other's tastes and talents is like crucial, I think. Because if you were constantly like coming to these points of just disagreement about like what's good musically, I think you can only do that for so long. So yeah, like it's really fortunate that like all four members of the band, I just think they're great musicians, and I love listening to them play. I love hearing what they come up with in terms of like song ideas, musical ideas. Yeah, and we're all kind of like seeking the same, not the same, but complementary visions.
Yeah, and I'm interested in knowing about, like, in your case, maybe the dedication of like being in an orchestra when you were first getting to know the upright bass and when you're first getting to know what it's like to play music with other people. You're in this orchestra and learning to function in that environment, and how that might have helped you develop your ability to collaborate so well within Lake Street Dive.
Yeah, I think playing in orchestras, like orchestras are huge. I think it's almost different with orchestra. Like playing in a band, I think is more similar to like my experiences playing in like jazz combos or even jazz big band growing up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you all have the same goal, which is to put on a great performance, and you do that by, in certain moments, being the star, and in certain moments being supportive.
And just like knowing when those moments are, it's such a...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can't be like throwing down all of everything that you could possibly play at every moment. You got to kind of create a balance. I think I remember hearing about like Duke Ellington's band, and he was kind of famous for having the same personnel in his band for a long time, and knowing they're playing so well that he would write parts for specific players. Like, this isn't just the saxophone part. This is, for this person. And like written in order for them to best display their personal talents. And that's something I think about with this band too, is like creating sections and space for everybody to do what they're best at.
I really feel like Lake Street Dive is such a good example for like how to function well within a team. Like, you guys really need to go around to businesses and be like, this is how we work together and how your team can collaborate together. Because just like thinking about what you just said and like applying it to like non-musical situations, it's the same type of thing.
Yeah, it's hard, and we certainly like come to our moments of struggle and impasse, but again, like we always talk about just keeping in mind, like, everyone wants the same thing. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants, we just so many times those difficulties are like communication issues and just somebody holding on to frustrations without speaking them for too long, and then it comes out in this weird way, and it's just once we talk about it, it's always like, yeah. Oh, you were feeling that way? Oh, I was feeling this way. Oh, duh. Okay.
Oh, duh. It's really, it really is all about communication, and also sometimes I find like it definitely takes more than one conversation to like soften like the edges of conflict.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's talk about your writing. If you could talk a little bit about the difference between writing a song for your voice versus writing a song for Rachel's voice.
Sure. Again, like, there are just certain Rachel is an incredible singer, and in particular, there are like certain things that she can just slam dunk. And so definitely I've had moments of writing, I'd say like the song Good Kisser, which is on the new Lake Street Dive record, is like a good example of a song that I was like, Rachel is going to sound amazing singing this chorus. I simply can't pull it off. But it was sort of like a song that I was really excited to hear her sing, because I knew she was going to do a great job at it.
When you hand that to her, or like when you present it to her, are you like, Rachel, I want you to sound like this, and then do you try to like sing it yourself, or do you play it on a keyboard or something?
I usually make a full demo of the song, so it'll have like all the parts and me singing on it.
When do we get to hear those?
Well. They can be, everybody in the band makes their own demos, and they're pretty special. Someday maybe we'll put out a
Lake Street Dive box set, please.
Secret demos. Yeah. I don't know. There might be certain members of the band who wouldn't be on board with that. But yeah, and then I think like I'm still discovering things about my own voice. I've only put out this one solo record, but I think there are things that I like to do with my voice too. Oftentimes the way that my voice emotes is like more kind of vulnerable sounding than Rachel's, because she's such a strong singer. She just like sings with such confidence. And so I think I'm having fun exploring like singing and writing songs that are more vulnerable, soft, flawed, for lack of a better word. Like there's something cool about that, and I've always loved singers that sing that way too, like Elliott Smith or Jeff Tweedy. Kind of like, I really like listening to voices that have some like weird character to them, which I would describe my own voice as having that. So
yeah, I'm interested in how your voice is developing. Another thing about your singing voice, I don't really have a question, but your singing voice it's really cool. And I think it's interesting that it's higher than your speaking voice. Mm-hmm. It's like, did you ever see that episode of The Simpsons that Billy Corgan was on? That was the first time I ever heard him speak, and it was like sounded so different than his singing voice.
Right. I have a very rangy voice. That was like in back in my church choir, I was kind of the utility player, and depending on whatever they needed, I would sing anywhere between like tenor to soprano.
Oh, wow.
Which is sometimes a problem writing for Rachel. She's always like, why do you have to write these goddamn rangy melodies?
That's funny.
Yeah, and it's kind of a crutch as a writer too, because it's so easy to make like the chorus pop or define a certain section as being the biggest by just making the range of the melody higher there. But it's not the only way to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that you're like a utility singer and you're also like a utility player with the upright bass, and like that has to like translate into your personality a little bit.
Yeah, maybe it's that middle child thing,
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, in Lake Street Dive too, Mike and Aki are quite rangy singers as well. So we kind of, in terms of like the background singer stack, it's always rotating. It's not like me on the top, Mike in the middle, Aki at the bottom. It's always try all the different variations for each song and see where it sits best.
Can you talk about how the tour that I don't know if you just wrapped up, but you did a tour recently with Theo Katzman. If you could tell us a little bit about Theo, what you like about his music, and maybe like how this tour in particular may have changed you as a musician.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been a fan of Theo for years. The first time I saw him was with Wolfpack, and it just blew me away. Like, they were so incredible at their instruments and so fun, and like the way that they put on their show, it's almost like a sports event. Like, people are running around the stage all the time.
It's kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show type of vibe.
Yeah. There's I've had this mantra for a while that, some people say less is more. And like, my mantra is just like, more is more. And I feel like they're kind of on that level, although certainly they have, nuance and delicacy, but they're just like giving you everything you could possibly want. And it's awesome. And Theo is a big part of that. He's like such a great drummer, and he's an incredible front man. Like, just the way he relates to the audience is so genuine and fun. And yeah, so I was a big fan, and we'd met them a couple times. Rachel had sat in on a show of theirs, and they had come to a show of ours in LA. And we had done a tour with Joey Dosick opening for us, who is part of that Wolfpack crew too. Anyways, when I put my solo record out, like, someone had hipped Theo to it, and he was super into the record. And so he like asked somebody for my phone number and texted me and said, "Hey, this is Theo Katzman. I love your record, whatever." And like, I was so stoked to hear that from him, because I was such a huge fan of his. And so anyways, we kept in touch, and we were like, you know, I love your music. Let's do something together. And he invited me out on this tour. And so I was opening for his band, playing solo. And then the band was joining me for the last couple songs on the set. And Theo was singing one song with me as well. And yeah, it was just great. Like, the music, it was such a good musical pairing. I loved watching his set every night. The band was so fun to play with. And everybody, whether it's just part of their, like, one thing about those guys is they don't tour that much. They only play a few shows a year. So like, I think this 4-week, like, US van tour across the United States, like, everybody was so stoked to be just like in the van doing drives across New Mexico. And that was like such a fun energy to be a part of. And, you know, we did a lot of listening to music together, talking about music. It was just great. I love those guys.
You released this live video with Theo's band for the song Love Doctor, which is a song on your solo album. And the vibe versus like the studio version, it's wild. Like, there's this like wild dynamic that seems like a new energy for you. And I wanted to know how you felt about that energy.
I felt great about it. Yeah, I think doing this solo tour was really enlightening in terms of dynamics. Because if you're just playing guitar and singing and there's no other instruments on stage, you have to figure out ways to make the music dynamic. And especially for me, like, I'm not a real guitar player. I like have kind of limited facility on the instrument. So I had to like create playable stuff that was like dynamic. And and it was a challenge, but also I found it really inspiring in terms of like what you can change on the fly. Like, to get a whole band to do something just kind of unexpected is difficult. But if you're the only one on stage and you say to yourself, like, oh, I got to do something to, you know, excite the audience right now, you could just be like, okay, I'm just not going to play guitar on this section. I'm just only going to sing. Or you could say, like, when this next chorus hits, I'm just going to slam it. And so that was like a really exciting thing for me to play with. And I think it kind of influenced, like, I think experiencing that solo, it was something that I was able to then bring back into a band setting. And like, since then, when I've played shows with bands or with a drummer, or, you know, I'm creating more dynamic arrangements.
And being like a front person and you know, performing solo and performing with Theo's band, that experience for you versus like being in Lake Street Dive, it has to be like hugely different. And I read a little bit about your experience with that, and found it interesting to say that even in learning how to stand on stage is different. Like when you're with your upright bass versus with a guitar. How has that process been like for you?
Challenging and fun. Like, yeah, I had to kind of just figure out what my like personality is on stage a little bit, because in Lake Street Dive I'm not really responsible for much of the like talking to the audience thing. But that was, I think in the end I sort of settled on a stage personality that's like pretty similar to my real personality. And so it's fun to be able to like really express that and sort of be who you are on stage.
So I had another question about being a utility person. I mean, I can relate to like being a utility person in like my line of work. And I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like I have a hard time figuring out what I like and what I want, and not in terms of like, I'm pretty good at making decisions, but like in terms of like life paths, you know, how is that for you? Does that hinder your ability to figure something like that out?
Well, yeah, I think like in Lake Street Dive, there are 5 people in the band. And so like having someone who's kind of a utility player, although definitely I'll assert my opinions. But in some ways, I think I'm kind of like a go with the flow person. And so that's like an asset to have someone, and hopefully everyone to a degree is that way. So, you know, when we're deciding, okay, when are we going to make our next record? What producer are we going to use? Like, what studio are we going to do? You know, like being able to express your opinions, but then also willing to cede to the majority opinion is like a really valuable and functional thing for an ensemble. And then like when I'm doing my solo thing, that kind of forces me to be a little more deliberate, or a little more, you know, you're at the helm, you're making all the decisions.
Yeah. It's like you can make a decision if you have to, but if you don't, you're like, okay.
Right. And I'm so used to having a bunch of other people to sort of not only have an opinion, but, you know, a really passionate opinion. Like you can show your album cover for your solo record to all your friends and family, and they'll say, I like it or I don't like it. But they're not taking the like ownership of it as themselves, you know? So like with a band, it's like everybody shares ownership in this thing, and thus like puts some really personal attention into all of the decision process. And then when all of that is on you, you kind of, I think you bear the weight of it a little bit, but also, you know, it has its rewards and ends up being all the more like expressive of your you-ness, you know?
Yeah. Okay. One more question here, and it is about running.
Ooh.
Yeah. I want to know what your relationship is to running, and also like from your perspective, can you talk about, I've heard you talk about a couple different of your favorite ways to listen to music. And in particular, can you talk about the action of running and listening to music?
Yeah, I love running. I do it most days. Sometimes it's the best part of my day. Like I just love being outside and the feeling of being in motion. And then it's a great time to listen to things. Had some really incredible experiences listening to music in like beautiful places, and just being like so psyched on music and life and whatever endorphins the running is giving me. And then I also love listening to like podcasts or audiobooks. Yeah, it's just a great time to sort of step away from whatever you're focusing on that day, you know, if you're working or if you're doing whatever you happen to be doing, it's nice to just say, okay, I'm going to devote this next hour to like moving my body and listening to something, whatever that may be. Probably.
How long have you been running? Yeah.
I think I ran a little bit in college, but I didn't really discover a love of running until like my early mid 20s. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to replace it with like other forms of exercise like yoga or lifting that are maybe like work different parts of your body, but I just love running. So yeah, I would have to do running and those other things, and usually there's not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like maybe my favorite time that I've ever been running and listening to music was on that study abroad in Morocco. I was like running through these along the beach on the sand, like wet sand, and then came upon these like sand dunes. And so I started like running up the sand dunes and then like bouncing down them. And I was listening, I remember, to Wilco and the song Theologians. And,
oh, nice.
Yeah, and just like bounding down these sand dunes, and the music sounded so good. And I was like, this is awesome.
Oh, that's so great. Cool. So can you stick around for like 2 more minutes and we'll do the lightning round?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll be right back. All right, Basic Folk receives support from Lindsay Myers at LMNO Management, who encourages listeners to check out the songwriting duo Mick Dean. You can download singles from their forthcoming EP by going to mcdean.co/basicfolk. And thanks to WIUP in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which airs Basic Folk 2 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. You can listen on 90.1 if you're in the Indiana, PA area, or at their website, wiupfm.org. Bridget Kearney, you ready for the lightning round?
So ready.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask you a series of yes or no questions, and you can answer them with yes or no or one sentence. All right, here we go. Dogs or cats or something else?
No pets.
Wow, that is something else. Ever? No pets ever?
I've had like roommates have cats, but I mean, I can't keep like a cactus alive. I'm on tour too much.
Oh, okay. All right. What is your coffee order?
Cortado.
First album you bought with your own money?
Soul Asylum, Runaway Train.
Oh, yeah, you did. First concert?
Ooh. Maybe my brother's show choir.
Oh man, that's funny. What is your dream collaboration?
McCartney.
So Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
What's your favorite type of white noise?
I don't know, water, I guess. Rain.
It's a good one. Flying or invisibility?
Flying.
What is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Tough one. Yeah, really, there's so many. Maybe Vancouver, British Columbia. It's beautiful there.
Whoa. All right, I'm going to go there. I've never been.
Oh, it's great.
I'm just on the edge of deciding, and I'm going to do it. All right, that's it. We've successfully completed the lightning round.
Okay.
So exciting. Bridget Kearney, thank you so much for taking so much time to talk.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The thing about Bridget Kearney is that she is like the coolest person I think I've ever talked to, and she doesn't even know it because she's cool, and that's what makes her cool, is that she doesn't know it. But really enjoyed talking to her. I really love the way she speaks. Like some people, when you're talking to them, they're just like naturally funny and awkward, but it's like really good. So she, you could ask her a yes or no question and she'll be like, sure. And it's very funny. Anyways, thanks to Bridget for being on Basic Folk. I'm Cindy Howes. I'm the host. Laura McCarthy produces Basic Folk. Lindsay Myers is our business manager. Alex Stanton of Townspeople does our music. You can find show notes at cindyhowes.net. Join our Facebook group. Sign up for the newsletter. Also, want to say thanks if you came to the Live at Club Passim event we had the other night. It was awesome. Going to be posting those episodes in a few weeks here on Basic Folk and hope to do that again. And if we will be doing it again, I'll let you know via the newsletter. So sign up. If you haven't signed up, you can do that at cindyhouse.net. And I will talk to you later. Okay, bye.